thank you. It's very interesting to see all the landscape that it makes. So, why is hospitality so important to us? It's a notion of a gathering because it puts together, I would say, at least 3 persons. There must be a host, and I will come back to this notion of host because it's so important in Latin. There is a guest, and there is a testimony, a témoin. Witness, thank you. Because the scene has to be related in some ways. If you have only 2 persons, in a sense the violence begins. The guarantee of something that could go beyond violence is this place of the witness. Sometimes the space itself acts as the third part, as the witness. Sometimes, and it would be interesting for an architect to think about how can you build or you think about a space that would somehow try to guarantee the position of what in psychoanalysis we call the tiers. For instance, it's a bit in the relationship, one would say, of hospitality between the psychoanalyst and the patient. In order to not be in a direct master and almost slave relationship where one would be completely at the mercy of the other because he's willing to question and progress and giving all his interior and soul and desire landscape, you have to have a cadre. So in psychoanalysis, this tiers, this third witness, is what we call the cadre. That is, it takes place in a certain moment, in a certain time, it's always the same. And both the analyst and the guest, I would say the patient, are in the same way relating and acknowledging the law that brings them together. The analyst can't say, well, no, Tuesday I just don't show up, it's my day and off. And same with the patient, it's a sort of a guarantee. So with hospitality, we see that in this exchange, we're going to go into that exchange pact, proposition, receiving, there must be something acting as, I would say, this space guaranteeing this pact.
What is that term that you said? It was a French word from the psychoanalytic?
Cadre, le cadre.
Frame.
The frame. But the frame, I think in English is more picturesque. No, it's le cadre is really it's a space-time. Mm-hmm. So it's the thing that you go that the analyst is compelled to on the same way as the patient is, and it's absolutely fundamental because an analyst that wouldn't be relating himself to the entre guillemets mastery of the cadre would be himself in the position of the master. What Lacan has interrogated, I mean, which can be really dangerous because the hospitality is the history of a meeting and also of a taking place. And first of all, we can see that it's present. It's one of the first rules present in all society we know about, which is quite, I mean, even the oracular ones, the oral, Melanesian, for example, from the tablet in Mesopotamia to it's really it's inscripted as one of the first human laws. It brings us to the fact that humanity probably as a truth is exilic. And that's something we will come upon in all this reflection, that probably one of the effects of the violence today is the coming back, the haunting of this exilic condition of humankind that we keep forgetting, putting aside, putting on the immigrants, figure and not taking for ourselves. First, because we are transition in this life, we are mortals, that we won't take anything with us in death, and also because we begin as a common with the exile and with the migrantship, and so the hospitality, as most and others have thought about it in the archaic societies, probably came from maybe a usual necessity. That is, you had to make hospitality to the other the best way possible, as if he was a king, because you could be the next day in this position. You could be dispossessed of everything. You could be yourself put to the necessity of going and ask for hospitality. So it was linked, very much linked to this giving and receiving as an act of reversal of possibilities always. The second thing is that Moss was saying, and you'll see that Derrida will oppose this vision. Moss says that hospitality, archaically, is always a pact, a sort of economic pact. That is, you invite the guest that is asking for hospitality as if he could really become one of yours, not as a beggar, not really, as I said, as a king, but you would ask him really recognition, and you would ask him something that he had to give you. Mainly, first, where he came from, what was his background, what was his, what landscape, family, genealogy came with him, and also presence, of course, and a sort of depth that you could call upon later. And I would say that one of the questions that Derrida put it up with hospitality was, in a very Kantian way, there is an absolute law of hospitality, and that is that would be, but it really functions as a Kantian idea. That is, with no matter what are the circumstances, you should invite the person, the guest, without asking him anything. To ask him, for example, his name, his identity, and the identity is going to be this century a matter of really of wars, of laws, until now, very, very important. To ask him his identity is already a violence. It's already asking him to come in your language, in a way. So the language is probably the passage between this absolute law of hospitality and what he will call the laws of conditional hospitality. What Derrida came upon with this idea of what we say, he says unconditional, but it was translated as absolute. That it's if you put them in, if you act them in a human group, it makes it blow up very, very quickly, because how would I say, it's the figure of the foreigner as coming into your home but it will bring himself as the parasite. It can break all the rules of the house, because it has no necessity in this figure of hospitality to maintain any common language with you. So the paradox is that this law of absolute hospitality that Levinas will come upon later on as the other as a hostage is also can bring also another type of violence. It's not the violence of how you manage to open or not your gate. That's the rules of hospitality, the laws that each common group and political group, from the tyranny to the democracy, will accord upon. It would be an idea devastating, but devastating in a necessarily way. That's why Derrida says, if as a society we forget that we have to aim towards this absolute hospitality, we are lost, because we will only relate to the security scheme, the economical one, the laws of hospitality, and this will necessarily be the prevalence, the augmentation of the disclosures, no matter what we say. That's what I was saying. The discourse is completely hiding something that cannot be said about who is going to be out and who is letting be in. So Derrida clearly said this necessity of absolute hospitality should be our horizon. We have to think and to let think, because as you know that the idea in the Kantian way is upon us. It's not us having ideas, it's the idea having us, I mean, say very short. It's we are relating to the globality of the idea in a way that cannot be under any circumstances drawn back to the material ways of its action. So in this sense, the idea of absolute hospitality should be a sort of vector, driving, a drive almost, that should worry us all the time and be at work, even in the laws of democracy and of hospitality, as a hunting subject, of our hunted subject, which is, usually not the case. I'll read a passage. The law of absolute hospitality commands a break with hospitality by right, with law or justice as rights. Just hospitality breaks with hospitality by right. Not that it condemns or is opposed to it, and it can, on the contrary, set and maintain it in a perpetual progressive movement. But it is as strangely heterogeneous to it as justice is heterogeneous to the law to which it is yet so close, from which in truth it is indissociable. So this opposition he sets between the rights and of justice, of hospitality, and the unconditional, I think, is the frame in which we have to think this question and go beyond, of course. But to me, it was really the way sometimes in his own genius, Derrida drives us to a paradox that is not, in a Hegelian way, dialectisable. You cannot put it into, you cannot accord it. It doesn't fetch together. And yet, that makes us think, always. And for example, I will take the example of Socrates when he's accused in his procès for the apology of Socrates, he's accused to be a stranger. He says, I will talk to you as a foreigner. I will take just you are convoking me for my procès, but then you will have to hear me as a foreigner. And they answer, no, you're Socrates. But the problem is, you knew that the accusation of Socrates was completely revolting or contaminating. That is, contaminating the youth. And so he said, all right, I will answer you, but as a foreigner. You think you know my language, but you don't. And I am not going to go in your language. So the first basis on what you invite me to respond, I refuse it. And it's very important because it's the whole idea that justice is not what it's about when you make a procès. It's about, first, is there a common language? How can, and with art, I think it's a very important question, because I think maybe art is a way to recall us that our maternal language has nothing of an evidence, that it's that to speak we have to go over a dread of the real, what Lacan said, the real, the anguish of the reality, and that even our first relation to language is already a translation. That's why I said if we could relate to our maternal language as a second one, probably things would be better, because at least we would always recall that we are in an ontological position as foreigners. And that's the Socratic lessons of his death, one of them, that he refuses the basis on which he is prescribed, and he says, you cannot make hospitality to my language, because then you would have to come to me, and I would, in a way make you naked, and I would get all your notions as nothing, and you cannot accept that. So the whole process is a fake, is a mise en scène. Alors, I have to go back to something very important. It's the Latin language, because there is a sort of génie de la langue to which we have to go back, and that is hostis. Hostis is the matrix of hospitality, and the real term is hostire. So, hostire is to, so the matricial word is to treat equally one to the other, to compensate and to pay in return. Hostire is sort of a merchandising terms of compensate and treat the other as an equal in a pact. From that you have hostimentum, that is a compensation.
Is this the same term that in the Catholic tradition becomes the body of Christ?
Yeah, the hostia. In Spanish, it's like that. So,
Hostility, so that is to compensate someone for something. And hostia is the victim. So there the problem begins. And it's the victim in a special way. It's the victim that is destined to compensate the anger of the gods. So it goes in a sacrificial way. Huh? It's the victim that is given also in thanks for.
Is it like a sacrificial victim?
Yes, absolutely. So the hostess is both. That's so important. The one who receives and the one who is and the guest. The hostess, and it's stated in French, l'hôte.
There's that Camus short story. There's a short story by Camus.
Oui.
L'hôte.
L'hôte. Voilà. The hostess is both the receiving and the received. In Latin, there's no difference.
So
And
what is hostimentum means? Like this can't really.
hostimentum is to compensate. To compensate for someone for something that has been done to him or you compensate hostile. Because you will have a series of so hostis is host and guest. And hostis is the root for hostility and hospitality. So in the root itself, the violence is inside. It's included on the first root of the word itself. Hostility is coming from hospitality. It's the same, the hostis. So in the name that says the host, one who receives, is named the hostile, the enemy. And it's also named the hospice. The hospice is the one who received the other. The hospitus, the guest, the one who stays not long. And you have, coming from there, the hostage, the otage, and the despot, which is the master host. Well, in a very so hospice and hostis, the proximity in the Latin language puts together the realm of hospitality and hostility. They put together the host.
Oh, no, it's bad.
Shall we begin again? I wanted to ask you something for the end of the afternoon. Is that some of you, maybe not all, but would come up like with an anecdote or a figure of hospitality that you came upon, trying to relate it to something both materially given. I mean, it can be in something you read, whatever, but trying to enhance the philosophic question inside. Because I think that's really the matter of philosophy is when you come up a mundane event, situation, whatever, it can be anything of the quotidian, the day-to-day life, and to try to make a rewind to the first question in terms of language that you can oppose to this situation. Or at least, what if you extract all the circumstances, what stands in the beginning as the question of the situation? If 5 or 6 persons want to do that, it could be interesting the last hour or two. And also, I will just in I just want to finish 2 minutes with Lot, and because we can't speak about this text of Lot, the Genesis 19, without at least making a sign towards the lecture of Kant, because it's in lecturing this, interpreting this passage, that he brings out the idea of the impératif catégorique. Just now I don't remember how it's said in English, to say the truth, always. So it's interesting because Kantian was quite conservative in terms of religion, and not philosophically, but he sort of tried always to put this grand écart between how he acted and how he thought. And he said, well, what is if Lot had said the truth? That is, he was dwelling, he had this to, and Kant, it's interesting because in that particular text, I don't have it here, but you can find it, I will give you the exact, Kant says, there is, for a society to be really human, in a way, one should never forget, it's like Derrida's unconditional hospitality, that one should never ever lie. He says in that case, with Lot, if he doesn't lie, then he gives to the massacre, the foreign hostages, in a way, the foreign visitors that are God. So what can we do? He opposes himself to this impératif catégorique, this figure of the Lot invitation, and saying how can we think with this necessity of lying in this particular, very special case of hospitality. It's interesting that out of all the figures that you can oppose to lying and saying the truth, it's this scene that he chooses as the most disturbing opposition you can make to the impératif catégorique of the truth, of being in the truth. I'll leave that open to thinking, but...
what was the name of the essay that comes on this?
It's done... I have it in French, c'est dans d'un ton apocalyptique, ma guerre employée en philosophie. I'll give you the English translation. So I will switch to the Greek world and a bit to show you this passage of Kurosawa, the Ren, the Shakespearean Lear, his interpretation of Lear, because we are heirs of course, also of the Greek way of relating to philosophy, to being, and as we were saying with Jones, that I would say that the figure in the Greek Hellenistic world is not so much the wanderer as an ontological, exiled figure as such. It is about the knowing, the one who knows or doesn't know. It's the figure of knowingness is really related to the foreigner. is the figure of mastership, of servant, but also towards the nomos, the logos, as such. And it's interesting to remember that the mastership of Socrates is he says many times that the only way he's a master to the others is that he knows he doesn't know, and the pupils or the disciple don't know more than him, or he doesn't know more than them, but they forget all the time that they don't know. I mean, it's this genius of the Platon and then after Aristotle turn that we have always to go back to the non-knowing condition to make a path towards truth, because Descartes is really the hero of it, because and psychoanalysis, we would say, we have to deconstruct first, because the hostility in us, or the thing that makes us more stupid or not unaware, is the thinking that we already know, but more of it that the non-assertive, the doxa, in the world of the doxa, and that we are always moving into ideas that we think are ours and that are just pre-digested stuff. And the whole work of Socrates, that's what he calls himself a midwife, is to give birth to what is more the real truth that inhabits us, but that we don't contain, we don't maintain in it. We always are distrustful of it, and we always forget that we have always to come back to this non-known condition in order to begin the real path. That's why the foreigner, in that sense, takes a very special idea, because in a sense the Greek society was very, I mean, the xenos was not even almost a man. You were integrated to a city, or you were a slave or a hostile person, but not relevant to speak with. It is very, as you know, I mean, the democratic Athens had lots of conditions to that. And so the question, when Socrates says, I speak to you as a foreigner, he does an amazing revolutionary terms in terms of Athenian, where it's supposed that what puts together a community is the language and the knowing, the logos. It's really more than a space, more than a political rules. It's a common language, and this is sacred. So it's interesting to go a little bit to the figure of Ulysse, because Ulysse keeps asking when he goes back on his way to Ithaque, what is the condition of hospitality? What if will I be acknowledged as a god or as a son of a king, or will I be mistrust? And the whole idea with the cyclope, for example, and he answers, "Je suis personne." Enfin, it's the what lays in these different scenes with Circe also is, what is the condition of being invité, guested, housed, and am I going to give up my spirit, my disappear as such? And with many scenes in the Ulysses at the end is alone, and he loses all his companions. So it's the idea of this companionship cannot resist the wandering quest of the soul, let's say, to make it very quick. And in the Hellenic world, the cosmos, the cité, it's a whole. The cosmological place gives the place to the person. It's not the subject as we related to it in modernity doesn't exist for a Greek mentality. The subject is a subject in a certain space, in a certain language, and in a certain space of recognition. Out of this space of recognition, it just doesn't exist. There's no such thing. I was making a sign towards Descartes, saying that for Descartes too, we have this to make this questioning on ourselves before coming to the real knowing. But in the Greek sense, even with Socrates, it's not the modern self as such that we are coming upon. It's the self as humankind, where knowing leads us is always to a community of humankind. It's never the subject, as I would say, Lacan, the divided subject of his desire. Not at all. And so the question is also the hubris. We will come up into that tomorrow too. For a Greek, hubris is all the regimen of passion and what can compels and puts you to very disastrous or extreme conducts. And the one who knows, the knower, is celui qui a la connaissance, should be in dialogue with this hubris as something that can destroy the possibility of humankind in yourself, but not as a subject, but as a common appartenance. So it's quite known, but I want to say it again because we can't relate to this Greek world at least before the Middle Ages, if we don't remember that the places, the dwelling, the architectures, it's always related to a cosmopolitical cosmos order. And if, for example, what happens with Oedipe, it's not only a question of mother, father, and what else. He becomes the outlaw because he defies the old, like Antigone, the laws of the city, and so of the cosmos. It's a cosmopolitical revolution that he makes. So the outlaw, in this sense, the foreigner, is someone that is very, very disturbing and has to be put to death, because what is at stake is the destruction of the order of the city, of the police. It's never a question of one-to-one relationship. And the gesture in the sense is always in that sense, hospitality is again a sacred gesture, but is a sacred gesture to keep the world as it is. It's and this is why, for example, le Troie, the cheval de Troie, where the city is taken by the inside, is a traumatic episode in the Hellenistic tales, because it's the enemy coming, not opposing one-to-one, but by the la ruse, mimesis, coming inside and breaking the city into. So these are new figures that Ulysse, in his way, alone interrogates. It's also I was saying that the threshold is very important, and it's Hermes. Hermes guards the threshold. It's Hermes, Hestia, and Hera, and Athena. But Hermes is really the messenger, but also the one who stays who guards the threshold. And if we go one step further, we can say that the place of death is undermining in a way the Greek world, in the sense that what is kept secret, what is not revealed, as when it's a place of dead, will come back and haunt the city. That's why many of the tragedies, for example, the whole tragedy of Antigone begins with the non-burying, his brother being left unburied, and what we will read here in Oedipe Apollonius again is about Oedipe's death that has to be left secret. It's what is unthinkable, because it's as if this order we were speaking about, the order of the master, the host, as a city or as a world, would be defied by the power of the secret, of the unknown, of what would come back from a memory that would always come back in a way, and that the grave, the funerals, the rituals are there to tame it, to make peace with the worlds of the dead. And if you don't make peace, or if you leave it open to violence or to secret, it can come back and haunt the whole whole city in a way. So Oedipe Apollon is a moment where after the whole tragedy has gone, Oedipe is walking with his daughter Antigone, trying to have a shelter, because he's blinded, and he's chased from every place. So the question for him, who has been a king, is now, who can shelter me? And it begins like this from enter from the country Oedipus, white-haired, blind, and in squalid garments, guided by his daughter Antigone. Says, tell me, Antigone, where have you come to now with your blind old father? What is this place, my child, country or town? Whose turn is it today to offer a little hospitality to the wandering Oedipus? It's little I ask, and I am well content with less. These three masters, pain, time, and the royalty in the blood, have taught me patience. Is there a resting place, my child, where I could sit on common ground, or in some sacred close? And while I rest, ask someone where we are. Stranger like us must be taught by the native and do as they desire. So that's the beginning of the scene, and in fact Oedipus will rest in a place that is secret, where no mortal should rest. So he wants to be as tranquil, as innocent, I would say, as little problem as it is. And from the beginning it's going to be a huge problem, because the people of the city who see the stranger, they are not knowing that it's Oedipus, will complain to the king that strangers have been dwelling in that place and so should be put to death, just because it's a sacred place. So, in a way, Oedipe is doing again a transgression. It's like a repetition of what he did with Laerte et Jocaste in a space, but only in a space. And it's interesting to see this displacement of a symbolical act that he did, transgression, in this other play where it begins like, oh, I just want to rest here, go and sit, and he just goes in absolutely impossible defended space. And what is interesting is that they're going to ask, it's Thésée, that's the king of the place, and that when Thésée knows it's a deep and a wonder, he says, they are my guests, so they are sacred. They are more sacred than the transgression that they've done to the place. So I decide they are sacred. And when Créon arrives, he wants to take him back. He wants to make a trial of Oedipe. And he opposes Thésée, and Thésée says, no, again, like the lot, so they are my guests, so you're not going to take them. And Créon takes Antigone as a hostage. Take Antigone and Ismène, his sister. And Thésée asks his army to go back to Créon and to take back the hostages, and says, you can't do that because you're breaking all the rules of hospitality. And Créon tries to make a hostile act of war against Thésée, saying to the people of Thésée, look, your king has transgressed the sacred soil. So he will try not to attack directly Oedipe, but this first transgression Oedipe made without knowing. That's why I say it's a repetition of what he did with his father, not knowing that, who killed his father and didn't know, but of course it was his father. And again, he stays in a place he doesn't know that was sacred. So he repeats as we say in psychoanalysis, it's le retour du refoulé. It comes back repeating itself. But Thésée, again, says the laws of hospitality are more sacred than the more sacred place of all, which is quite transgressive of him too, to do that. And that's why, at the end of the Oedipe à Colonne, he says, all right, now I will keep my secret the place of my death, not even to my daughters. First, because they could be taken as hostages to know where I'm buried, and then because the place of my burial, of the grave, could become a place of pure disaster, of violence, because of my history, because of or of worship also. So it must be kept secret. And he asks that Thésée, because Thésée has protected him from even the laws of his own city. Says, you're the only one I can relate to be my so he said, on the threshold of death, then Oedipus declares to Theseus, son of Aegeus, I'm going to teach you. So it's a lesson. Again, you have the knowing, what I would say, that in the world in the Hellenic world, it's always a question of the logos, the who knows what. What things are led for you and this city, unpaired by age. I'm going to lead you myself right now without a guide to hold on to the place where I must die. Oedipus thus thinks he will choose the dwelling, his last dwelling place. He wants to be alone in doing it. He's the only one to decide it, the only one for that, alone as someone who signs, alone because he decrees such a choice and wants to get by himself to the place of his death and his burial. He asks for a secret of this kind. So he says, don't tell anyone else, don't reveal either where it is hidden or the area it is in, so that it may always afford you strength of many shields or spears brought in from your outside. But the things which are sacred and not moved by speak not affected by the discourse. You will learn yourself when you go there alone, as I would not reveal it to anyone. So, he, at the last moment, he gives, he says to Thésée that knowing the place of his death will give him a kind of invincibility. It's again, we have a sort of pact of to this price there is knowingness. So voilà, the whole journey, and after even with Antigone, because she herself will have no grave in a way. I mean, she will be buried alive, but it's a sort of again a metaphor of the death of the father. It's interesting that the link will not be disclosed. She is, as she would be related to the death, the unburied death of the father and of the brother, and cannot dissociate with it. So I will make a sort of a link with Shakespeare, Lear, because hospitality also is the interrogation, as I said, of dispossession. It's not only as how do you welcome the one who doesn't possess anything, and what are the conditions for which someone can be welcome in your home, and what are the guarantees you are going to ask him for this dwelling. But it's also about dispossession. What is the... If you are a master, then you are the only one who can dispossess yourself. And the paradox of the mastership, and again Hegel will tell us that very well, is that he is more the master the minute he dispossesses himself, because no one can do it but himself. And it's interesting to see that there are two plays where it's the most evident. It's Richard II, and Lear. And Richard II has been forbidden of playing by the Queen, because in this there is a very famous passage where the King Richard II says, "I undo myself." Says really, I undo as king. I'm a king unkinged. And to the England at that time, it would be quite horrifying to see that you could show the peuple that the king could unking himself and not be in a certain way in relation to the god or something that would be upon him and let him be unkinged. And in Lear, I think it wasn't forbidden because Lear is there is the sort of a filter of his so-called craziness. So because he's supposed to have become crazy, he can, with the fool, interrogate, question what is being a master or not, and all what questions Lear, which is, you could stay a month with that, but in a more secret and way that's not, that seems at first sight less problem for the monarchy. And I choose a little scene in Han, the Kurosawa, who interprets the King Lear. Well, instead of having 3 daughters, has 3 sons, and the fool he makes of the fool a very interesting figure, not quite the Shakespearean figure, and he, in a way, in the scene you will see, Lear doesn't blindfold himself. We could relate the blindfolding of Lear, of course, to the Oedipian one, has to do with having to come upon the truth, because Lear, I recall you asked his three sisters, three daughters, at the maximum of his power, he decides to give his own territory, and I would say that maybe it's the perverse question by excellency. It's that what price are you going to give me if I give you my mastery? It's a no-end game. It's a tricky game because you don't give anything and you don't receive anything, but it's supposed. So the two daughters have understood that perfectly, being on the perverse game themselves, and emphasize each on one to how much they love their father. And the third one, who is in the innocent, it's an idiotic figure, I would say a Dostoevskian one, like a Melvillian one, that she will not enter the perverse game, which makes her almost a psychotic figure. And she replies, as you remember, to her father, asking me how much you love me, how can you tell the wonders of your worshipping me? And she said, nothing. So almost a pre-Beckettian answer, and those three words will destroy the whole the whole country, at least on the play. And so when Lear realizes that he hasn't heard that the true love and true recognition was on these words of Cordelia, he blinds himself like a deep, and he goes on the road with the fool. And in the scene there in Rennes, he's not blinded, so he's really like the old king hasn't lost everything, and with the fool, and he is invited to a place by a blind man, and the blind man. So I think Kurosawa splits the inside of the king in the king who has lost everything, and the blindfoldness of this young man who, in fact, is a victim of the former king, well, who was the king before, a very cruel despot, and makes, with the tonality of the place of the blindness, the place of the king, and the place of the fool, a very moving happening, I would say, of what the issue is when you dispossess yourself, and that in a way dispossession as a perverse, I would say that the movement of dispossession has two extreme figures. It's one would be the mystic, the negative path of the mystic, discourse and conduct, that is the going towards nothingness, to the void, and to the place where not only you don't possess anything, but you don't even possess yourself. You're not even a self. There's not even anything as God. I mean, it's a whole movement of this construction and dispossession until the void. And the other figure would be dispossession is the mastery, as it's more the game. It's the maximum of the power you can tempt. You can be tempted to. It's the Faustian game. Is to dispossess yourself, and it's. But then it's done as a perverse game. It's done to put the others in a more obligated figure towards yourself. the interesting thing in Lear is that it's all upside down, because Lear tries to do that. He tries to dispossess himself, to have his daughter praise him even more, and in a sense put him as a god that you would be ever indebted to. And he realized that not only they are more perverse than him if possible, but that through this game you will endlessly be in a debt and violence enrollment, and it only will lead you to more violence, which, if I could make a very bold step, will bring you also to nowadays question of the depths of the that the logic of when you put someone into debt, you are putting him into violence on the first place. I mean, the one who puts the other into debt when he gives something is responsible for the violence that will come upon. Because even when the other can repay the debt, the movement of violence is given, because the time, because of the time, the giving back of the debt will never recuperate the first movement of the soi-disant giving. It's not a giving. It's a perverse way of enslaving the other, telling him, I will help you. So not only it's destructive, but it is destructive on a figure of discourse that is supposed to be helping. This is why, in a way, it's a figure also of perverted hospitality. I will come to that this afternoon. All the perverted figure of hospitality, that is the relation to the other, that turns into destruction. Maybe we can just. So yes, I find this scene quite strong, because he misplaced or displaced the question of truth and the price of truth. And also there is really this questioning of why the betrayal of the one whom you think are closest to you, and that will be the real foreigners. They are the one that you that inhabit your own house, and I think that's something you find both in the Christian tradition, as you said, in the Hebraic and the Greek tradition. That is, you have to break the rules and the false setting of a family in order to go towards wisdom. And if you seek truth, you have to make yourself a foreigner and to put yourself in that situation of asking hospitality to the one who really knows, and that will not appear himself as a master or as one who possesses, have possessions. And of course the violence included in that question of dispossession runs through the whole history of Occident. I mean, because the space is such an issue, the space, the architecture, the way the cities have been edificated, and the rule of the mastery always related to space and time places, the dispossession of what you own, and especially of the places you own, is very worrying and questioning figure. So that's why the dispossessed king, or the king that chooses, in a way chooses, to be a wanderer, like the fool that had the right to test him, in a way, is a figure that was tolerated only, and I think in that particular the King Lear, only because you could say it's mad, it's madness. And we'll see this afternoon, or question this figure of what is hospitality to madness. How is it in our time? How do we do that? There's the whole Foucault analysis of what we choose to do with that. Well, choose. What is the relation in between politics and madness? Hospitality, of course, is also asile, hospital. This whole these words too. What could we think as auto-hospitality? What is hospitality to oneself? For example, in literature, with the journal, the journal, a diary, I would say, of writers. What is convoking someone to your own hospitality, to say something of the world? What is this distribution? And also the figure of the monster. What is when you open in the hospitality, you always have to imagine that it can be not only the god you make enter, but the monster. It's the barbe bleue, the blue-beard figure, the ogre one, but also the disguised evil, wicked man, or Circe, woman. And this is also the figure of the uncanny, because it's interesting to see that when Freud comes with us with this particular reflection on the unheimlich, or heimlich, the uncanny, la non-familiarité, he makes an echo very strong to what is the more worrying, is what is the closest to us, but that suddenly we don't understand at all. And this shifting of, for example, the haunted house, the house that is supposed to be all welcome, and that suddenly there's some presence and you can't figure out what it is, and from hosting it becomes hostile. This turning, this shifting, is very interesting and important to come open to, because in the modernity we are not in a world protected by cosmology like in the Greek, of course, world. And
earlier when you were talking about this notion of sort of debt and violence related to hospitality, it reminds me of this. There was an essay by the writer Tom Wolfe in the early 70s called Radical Chic, which was essentially a non-fiction kind of journalistic piece about Leonard Bernstein, who used to run the New York Symphony Orchestra, having a dinner party at his house as a fundraiser for the Black Panthers. And it's this sort of story about the role of the Black Panthers was to tell the radical story, to freak out these Upper West Side New Yorkers, and eventually they wanted to be freaked out, and then they were going to cut the check for the movement, and meanwhile it's this kind of wine and cheese type scenario, but just the dynamics and all of that, it's quite fascinating.
And also I think to see that in this to go back an instant to where we began, that is the figure of the witness of what happens when there's no more witness to the scene of hospitality. because in a way, in the scene of hospitality, as we've seen, the guest sometimes asks for hospitality, sometimes doesn't even ask for nothing and is invited, and it makes a whole different space in between, in common. And one could say that the space, the mutual space that is born from the encounter is new, it's a beginning. It's not the continuity of the history of the host and the continuity of the history of the guest. It's another history coming out, it's a beginning. And like all events and real meetings, this beginning opens a new time. So it opposes in a way a new time and a new space that the ancient, the old ways of relating to the meeting in itself, to the vocabulary of the host or the guest, are remote, are not, are useless. And that the witness is so important because he can be the archivist, the memory of this passage between the ancient time, moment, and the new, what happens as a new way of a new community, in a sense. And if there isn't any witness to the scene, any violence can burst up, and the story can be completely rewritten in another way, from the point of view of who takes the power. So, to me, in a political point of view or in an architectural one, this position of the witness is very important to think about and to interrogate. Where does it stand today? Where, what do we do, or how do we eliminate this figure?
Which I think is really interesting about Derrida talks about surveillance and wiretapping, which is the moment where the narrative switches from hospitality to harboring, and depending on what perspective that comes from. So it kind of shining the light inside to the home, inside of the subject, to reconstruct it as a possible guilty subject transgressing the law.
Absolutely. And that way, and that was also his discussion with Levinas, because he Levinas considered that there is never such thing as a mutual space. Mutual space is pure imaginary. We are always on disruptive, asymmetrical space with otherness, and that we keep trying to forget this, to neutralize, to harmonize, to bring ourselves to a mutual agreement, I would say. And in doing this, we precisely put the seed of the highest violence, because we don't recognize that the other is former to the self, I would say, and that the only guarantee that we would have of treating him as almost an equal would to remember always that we are unequal, that he dominates us, that we should put ourselves, he goes very far in this ethical construction, Levinas, he said, we should put ourselves as the hostage of the other. We should go that far to be responsible of, and it was, at least it was a whole discussion between them and the ground, this common ground that Derrida figured that should be at least discussed up and tried to be saved. But it's a real question. This, and also because the question of the name, the impact of the identity and the questioning the name. For example, on the latest laws in France, it is specified. It's very recent. It's like 2 or 3 years ago that the immigrant who wants to have the nationality, or at least even for a short time, should know the language. That was never asked before, and to me it's a very questioning step. We take that, and it's questioning because, of course, one could say, well, why not? Language is not violence. Language is you can keep your own language and come into the language of the other. Why not? But then, if you see it as a step towards the necessity of integration, it shifts to something much more uneasiness. That yes, there is at stake a loss if you take the generation of the language of the origins. And so what is asked as a price for this loss and for this being welcomed, so-called welcome.
In Japan, they go one step further, and it's not just taking the language of Japan, but you also have to, if you want to become a citizen there, you also have to have a Japanese name. So it further disrupts your identity because you then have to have this new name in their language. I couldn't just go there and be Terence Beckett anymore. I have to be like Terensu Beckett, or I have to completely change it to be then Japanese.
I have this reverse case that, as many of you may know, Chinese like to make up an English name for ourselves. So I have a Zhuang, which is not belong to me in any way, but I get this from the administrative process of getting a passport. But my friend, they actually get an English name in their junior school time or even primary school, so as to get this, communication to the others. So that we have this different process of, you kind of reverse of that case.
Yeah, most of my Chinese students and Japanese students they've picked, and it doesn't even sound like they're. Sometimes if they pick something that sounds like their real name, but sometimes
and it gets
like
actually flexible. We are changing the name from time to time.
Yeah.
Actually.
It's funny too in the U.S. I think to become a citizen, there's a series of questions you have to answer in English, but it's set up so that you can study them and learn them without actually learning the language. So it's
that was the case before in France. You should answer the question in French, but then it was a whole sort of frame you could.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't have to make as if you know the language. Okay, so we.
I have to say Alessandro, but I find it more interesting in the US, in a lot of other places as well, the way in which you have to actually change it to being swept off your feet by love to enter. Which is very. You have to show albums where they're looking, especially at the face and seeing if it does look like it. That I find even more perverse. The idea that, for instance, if the circumstances are your visa is about to expire and you have to show a sweeping, and that there was a sudden acknowledgement by you and the other person that you couldn't live without. I mean, the selling of that is for these really the only way.
Well, the way the emotion is used today is very interesting to look at because it's impressively perverse the way it's.
But I like the idea that there's images.
Yes.
That people are experts in looking at images.
It's amazing.
Check whether
it's true or not.
It's not only in the US.
No, that's what I'm saying, in a lot of other countries.
In Belgium, we have that.
Yeah. In all the countries where it's easy to get residence.
All right.
It's a small question. I think it's small. When you were talking about the example of the king who can only do go on as a wonder by being had. I wonder if that's, I always wonder if that's, if that straightforwardness isn't also an introduction, meaning the idea of being a wonder is the best tension possible to the problem of the wondering. So as a creative writer, I would grab the top most expensive character to show the problem of wondering. What
Very
to,
interesting.
if I wanted to write about the road. So I always wonder if that process of hospitality, which is not only, it's about place, but it's also, I also always wonder if that's not also a device that has been very old for us as writers and thinkers, to invite the expense, the character who can throw away the play, the one that can make such a labyrinth for us, that it might be so difficult, it might be so difficult to get out of it, that it somehow secures that something will happen.
Yes,
Something important will happen in our
absolutely.
process.
To take the extreme to show the difficulty of the craft too, and the worth of it.
And for the writer
Oui.
itself.
Yes, absolutely.